On episode 2 of the Geek Music Podcast, Nicole Deeker and Rai Kamashiro talk musical culture and getting past societal expectations in art. We introduce our new Geek Music News segment, plus a first look at our Dur 3.1. Stay tuned. Hello, and welcome to episode 2 of the Geek Music Podcast. Yes, we're doing an episode 2. I'm as surprised as you are, and frankly, a little worried. We've made a couple of changes. This episode will be quite a bit shorter than the pilot. That's because now we know better. And we're introducing a couple of new feature segments. The first will be Geek Music News. We will also talk briefly about DIY in our special DIY short segment. So let's get straight to it, shall we? Geek Music News is next. Johnny Nero Action Hero has a benefit show for Geek Girl Con at the White Rabbit in Fremont and Seattle on May 17th. Hopefully you listened to this podcast early enough to catch that. Marion Call's Kickstarter-backed Live in Europe just dropped. It's a live album. Check it out on Bandcamp, marioncall.bandcamp.com. Marion is, of course, on tour. Check her website for details. The Double Clicks start on a massive North American summer tour. They're doing shows in Cascadia, Canada, California, the States, with a May 26th show at the River Rim in Bend, Oregon. Check thedoubleclicks.com for a full list of shows. Vixie and Tony are playing at the Wayward Coffee House again on June 22nd. That's in Seattle. Lenon Shi will be at the Greenwood Ren Fair at the end of June in Richland, Washington. Yours truly may be a part of that. We're not sure yet, but we're talking of it and talking of. Crime and the Forces of Evil will be playing the Clallam Bay Comic-Con on the Olympic Peninsula. That event's being put together by Donna Barr of Indie Comics fame. That's June 14th and 15th. Kirby Crackle got to open for Weird Al Yankovic last month in Calgary, and that's pretty epic. Their 4th full-length album is coming out in July. That's kirbycracklemusic.com. Hello the Future have a new release scheduled for the end of May. It's called Giant Robot Album. Follow @HelloTheFuture on Twitter for details. Anamanaguchi have a Kickstarter for their Endless Fantasy double album and tour. Personally, I've backed it because there's no way I'm not owning a vinyl pressing of a Chiptunes album. And as I record this, more people are backing the project for the vinyl pressing than for a CD. I am honestly starting to wonder whether the vinyl LP is going to outlast the compact disc. And that's this month's Geek Music News. If you have any geek, nerd, or fan-related musical projects you want talked about here at any level, please send your feedback and information to crime@crimeandtheforcesofevil.com or via the link on the podcast page. If you're on YouTube, just look down in the description. There's a link there. Back around NorwestCon, we stopped and talked with Nicole Deeker of Hello the Future about her upcoming appearance at the NWC Music Geek Music Festival. Most of that interview made it into the pilot episode of the podcast, but along the way, we got into a discussion about the culture of music, particularly the questions of participation and communication. The resulting discussions were so interesting that we decided they deserved to stand alone in separate episodes. So, now that we have time, let's go back to that interview with Nicole, and we'll talk about making music in North America. One of my hobby horses is musical culture and non-musical cultures and the wide spectrum of cultures that are in between, that are varying degrees of musical. I want to lay out a couple of ideas on that, and then you can take them apart with an axe.
This sounds excellent.
So I've got some experience in other cultures. I've toured around a little bit, but I've also just lived some places. And one of the things that's getting in the way of people doing music, as opposed to consuming music, is the idea that you have to be kind of a magic person to be taken as other than a, bluntly, I'll put it as wankery. Mm-hmm. To be spending time on music is to be wasting time, unless you have this special magic bit set, at which point you're a real musician, and then it's okay. In contrast to places like, say, Wales or Newfoundland, where music is the thing everyone just does. I've heard you refer to the culture, California, North America, Canada, wherever you want to go, as musical cultures. And I don't really see it as that, as long as there's that barrier to participation. For me, a musical culture is a culture where people do music more than simply absorb it.
I think it's a very interesting question, and I think what doing music means is sort of at the crux of it. For example, and having not been to Wales, The picture of Wales that I have in my mind is a magical land where everyone kind of looks like Harry Potter, and it's like a filk convention where they're all singing all the time. And that's not a Welsh accent at all. That's not even an accent. But you know what I mean.
Oh, it's an accent. It's just not the one you're looking for.
If you're talking about something like OVFF, right, Ohio Valley Folk Festival, where you walk in and everyone sings, regardless of background, talent, length of training, you know, do they write a song or do they sing someone else's song, but everyone's just singing, that's one thing. But if you're thinking about, I'm going to take, you know, average person, which is not true. An average person is a construct and there's no such thing. But think about all of the ways Americans, and I'm just going to use America, consume and interact with music. We listen to it, but we also build and curate our own playlists. We put them in our earbuds and walk down the street singing do 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 singing do, and while we're sort of humming along to the things, we come home, we're doing the dishes, and we're like, rock on with the dishes, you know, and then we sit down and we play Rock Band, or if you're a 13-year-old girl, you sit with your hairbrush in front of your mouth and pretend you're on American Idol. In fact, the whole American Idol thing is an example of American participatory music culture, even though our participation as a whole is limited to voting for the people with our little clicky things. I would be hard-pressed to say that we are not a musical culture, because we interact with music in such a personalized kind of way. But it isn't. I mean, it isn't we sit around with guitars and we sing song circles and bardic circles, unless you're at OVFF or you're at a convention, or when you were younger, you were at summer camp, you know. So I don't know. That's sort of how I feel about that. So now you get to repost.
Great. It's a verbal blog. But wait, I guess that's what a podcast is, isn't it? Oh, shit. Look what we've done. We've reinvented the wheel.
That's what it is. Always.
But
forever.
I wonder whether you can really include, I mean, I see your point about the idea of curation. And I don't want to discount curation completely. Except that I question how many people really go out and aggressively collect stuff and curate it. And as a percentage, I'm not saying that there are no musical culture type people in North American culture. I've already pointed out counterexamples, OVFF and the whole folk community. One of the things I like about the folk community is the fact that it's so participatory. But for most people, there's a golden age of music during which they care, and then they listen to nothing else again ever.
That's... And
that's borne out by purchasing numbers and listening numbers and radio station formats. That number has become less representational in the era of digital music, certainly. So that may be changing. I am totally open to that idea. But historically, that's very much been the way it's been for some time.
No, sure. I mean, I remember growing up listening to my mom listening to the oldies station, you know, because you listened to the music you loved when you were in high school for the most part. And that's sort of been around forever. But, well, just to answer your question about curation, I think that many people, and again, when we talk about many people, we're getting into really sort of a techno class group, for example, which crosses age levels and it crosses gender levels for the most part. But the people, for example, who have access to iTunes.
That's almost everyone at this point, though.
Almost everyone at this point are the people who are going to be actively curating and who are going to buy impulse purchase, who are going to impulse purchase new music because they heard the Harlem Shake or because, you know, whatever. And curation is not necessarily participation, no more than collecting a library makes you an author, which is probably the question you're really getting down to.
Exactly, because if you define participation that broadly, then really all cultures that don't outright ban music are musical cultures. And I think that makes the term kind of not useful, at least not as an identifying term to talk about specific characteristics. For me, a more direct commonality, not just the question of doing music, but the ability to talk about it.
Ah, yes.
Because if you grow up in North America, Cascadia, California, United States, Canada, Republic of Newfoundland, I have a Newfoundland Liberation Army t-shirt. It is awesome. Wherever you grow up in, certainly North America, you will have been forced to sit through, whether you like it or not, year after year after year after year of English classes.
Yes.
You will be in these rooms, no matter how disinterested you try to be, when all of these sorts of ways of looking at the language and looking at literature and looking at and talking about stories and articles and things like that are at least presented around you. You may be doing your damnedest to ignore all of it. For the most part, for the overwhelming part, there is no similar experience in music for most people.
Oh, no, I completely disagree. I mean, did you not have music class in your school?
Certainly not mandatory, and
You
almost
did? Oh,
none.
that's very interesting.
And
So-
and most of the people that I have experience with, there was the option of band, and there was certainly the option of orchestra at my high school, but it was certainly not mandatory, and most of the people did not do it. And that has been in my talking with people outside of places like Newfoundland where they're doing it at home,
Sure.
and where you certainly came up doing it at home.
Right, but we also, until junior high, when it became an elective, we had mandatory, like, 30-minute music classes twice a week, like kindergarten through, 6th grade. And you learned basic music literacy, whether or not you stuck to it. And that just may be, I may be an outlier, but I grew up in rural Missouri, so there you go.
You were the first person who's come back to me with this type of experience.
All right.
And English is mandatory a lot longer. You might
Yes,
know.
English is mandatory forever.
And it's a lot. It's more than 30 minutes twice a week.
Correct.
I often find myself trying to talk to even other musicians to try to define terms, to explain the difference in the way of handling this sound to produce an effect versus the way of handling the same sound to produce another effect, and having no ability to verbalize it other than saying this and this. And you'll note that there is no good listens in the way that there is a good reads. SoundCloud comes closest, but I think part of that is the lack of a common vocabulary, the lack of a common tongue.
It's interesting because just like grammar has a lot of technical terms, which we know instinctively because I'm creating a sentence right now without thinking about, subject and predicate, music also has a lot of technical terms that we don't really think about. We don't think about ritardando when we automatically slow down at the end of a group song. We don't think about a repeat sign every time we repeat a chorus, but yet these communicative tools exist. Although, just like sitting around talking about the difference between effect and affect, you don't do that in polite conversation.
But people can talk about things like, they like this book because of this type of plot that was followed. They like this book because these sorts of characters. Mm-hmm. But when you start talking about liking this part of a song or that part of a song because of, say, the spatial placement of the sound,
right?
When you throw that word out there, even other musicians that you're recording,
yes,
I'm speaking from experience, will go,
yes,
nani? And will have no idea what you're talking about. And you have to say this or this, which again I have no investment in SoundCloud. I don't even have any music up there, but I love their comment system because it lets you point at something. Your comment, your comment floats there as a little icon until the song that's currently playing gets to that point, at which point it pops up. So you actually have that ability to point, which is why they have come closer than anyone else to doing a Goodreads type music site. Mm-hmm. And I personally find that frustrating. You may not.
Well, it's a very fair point, though, because I'm recording an album right now and trying to communicate with my sound designer and with the full band, I was talking about, for example, a crunchy sound. What does that even mean, really?
The lack of a common tongue. I have a total definition for what that means. I have no idea if it's the same as yours.
But arguably, you could say that this sentence is lyrical, and what does that mean either? It just means it's sort of pretty, and crunchy means it's kind of... That's the sound that crunchy means. I don't know. It's like a fuzz pedal.
And you're dealing with people who are musicians and people who are actively in this field. If you throw out they'll have some idea. They'll have a starting point sometimes.
Right.
But when you get out to the general public or a larger subsegment of CF, the Goodreads population, which is not the general public, but is a substantial subset compared to people who try to talk about this stuff in music anyway.
Right.
If you expand it out even that far, you get nowhere. It falls over.
It would be interesting to collect comments on a particular piece of music and see, for example, which adjectives are used the most often.
And even beyond that, how to describe this part or that part. Everybody who sits through those middle school and secondary school English classes has at least been around when people around them have been deconstructing a plot and analyzing the parts. And they have not been doing that in music.
Not on that kind of scale, yes.
In terms of, does this culture consider that important? Clearly not.
You're absolutely right. I would say that finding a common language for music and learning a specific language about, deconstructing music. For example, Shostakovich writing his music specifically for political means, or Ravel writing compositions after seeing World War I. This is this is only available for people who take really sort of serious high-level music classes, while everyone who goes through junior high knows that the old man in the sea is a Christ symbol.
Exactly. Mm-hmm. And that, for me, is where you start getting into the difference again between a very musical culture and a more consumptive minimalist versus an outright kill all the musicians culture, which are out there and terrifying. It's like, bye. But
Sure.
Was that fun?
I think it's fascinating. Let's put the whole thing on the podcast.
As many of you know, I have a blog over at the band website, crimeandtheforcesofevil.com/blog. Being a DIY musician, I post a lot about DIY topics, particularly home recording, and particularly doing it on the cheap. An audio podcast is no way to cover DIY properly, so I'm going to talk about it improperly, and I wanted to talk a little bit about Ardour 3.1 today. Ardour is open-source digital audio workstation software. It lets you record music, it lets you edit tracks you've recorded, it lets you mix tracks, apply effects, basically everything you'll do from the engineer's side of the recording studio. It's the open source answer to Pro Tools and the heavy-duty version of programs such as Audacity and GarageBand. I've been using Ardour since 2010. I've watched the version 2 series improve and stabilize. Dick Tracy Must Die and Cracksman Betty were both recorded using it. Early versions were pretty hit or miss, particularly in terms of stability. The version 3 release series is a massive rewrite. While still recognizably Ardour, it's undergone a major facelift both externally and under the hood. That can set off a lot of red flags because with a new codebase comes a whole new set of bugs. And UI changes, particularly if they blow with fashion winds, can bring both unnecessary complexity and a big relearning curve. I've only been using 3.1 for a few days now. I put it through some torture tests right off, and believe me, I have some, then started a couple of song projects on it, and recorded and edited this podcast. So far, I'm genuinely impressed. Poking around, I keep finding features that I'd wished for in the past, now finally available. The new in-project navigation window, a UI change, is just a wonderful thing, letting you see huge amounts of information about your projects at literally a glance. Restacking plugins has gone from really kind of annoying to pretty trivial, with the fader itself being treated as just another plugin. I've wanted this for longer than I knew. VST support is reportedly improved, though I haven't tried this yet. That's a big deal if you use a lot of plugins. Ardour is now dramatically more efficient in its use of screen space, which has been a big problem for me in the past, and is a big problem for anyone recording a lot of tracks. It has had in the past functionality called Maximize Editor Space, and that Maximize Editor Space was actually pretty useless because to really grow the amount of room available for editing tracks, it had to remove or hide or disable a whole fleet of controls, which made the resulting editor window kind of useless. That's no longer the case, in no small part due to its better use of real estate. Pleasantly, it is not perceptibly slower on the same hardware. My system's latency actually fell, as did load averages. They've clearly done something substantial underneath the hood because I never had the kind of latency numbers I should have. Now I'm getting closer to them. And so far, at least, it seems remarkably stable. If anything, more so than 2.6.16, which is a bit of a feat for such a major rewrite. Just last night, I accidentally did some things which would have made the version 2 series crash while editing this podcast. 3.1, however, stayed up just fine. Hopefully that trend will continue. So if you're looking to do some home recording that requires a bit more horsepower than GarageBand has to offer, take a look at Ardour. The learning curve, I will warn you now, is brutal. But so far, 3.1 seems to deliver on Ardour's many promises. I'll keep you updated on the blog as I discover more. Requirements: any Linux distribution with the 2.4 kernel or later, libc 2.7 or later, jack audio, and ALSA. That should include pretty much all Linuxes post-2008, and if you're running a 2008 or before Linux and it's connected to a network, what the hell is wrong with you? You'll need to remove or disable pulse audio, at least if you care about performance. It's not specifically listed as a requirement, but trust me. I'm happy to report that the versions of Jack Audio and the ALSA drivers included with Ubuntu 12.04 long-term support are recent enough so you won't have to try to install Jack on Ubuntu, which even the Jack author says is a nightmare. Ardour also runs on OS X 10.4 Tiger through 10.7 Lion. It should also work on 10.8 Mountain Lion, but that hasn't been through certification yet, so on some pages they say it works, on other pages they say it should work, but they're not sure. I haven't seen anybody complain, so I'm presuming it does. Ardour OS X supports all core audio devices, but still requires jack audio to be installed on top of that. If you want me to do an overview of any other specific DIY topics, let me know at crime@crimeandtheforcesofevil.com. And for more detailed DIY, the band blog is at crimeandtheforcesofevil.com/blog. We also talked with Rai Kamashiro back in March, and our digression into the social politics of doing music went into some pretty emotionally complex areas. I think there are certain aspects of the experience which people mostly just don't talk about, but that didn't stop us. I don't think there's a lot of difference here between music and other artistic efforts, and I think anyone trying to do creative work might want to listen to this next segment. So let's go back to our discussion, where we lead off kind of where Nicole and I left off, musical and artistic expression being a negative unless you have the magic real artist bit set. If you're doing music and you don't have this sort of magic, you're legitimate, a musician, and therefore special kind of attribute floating around you, people treat doing music as, at best, kind of wankery, and certainly something they don't want to hear about or know about or have anything to do with. But once you have that bit set where people's like, oh, you're a musician, then it's okay, and they want to know what's going on. And for me, that's a real barrier to the sort of participatory culture NWC Music is in no small part about. I was wondering what thoughts, if any, you had on that. And also, you've lived a couple of places in North America and also in Japan, and if you had anything you could say about the differences between the different places you've lived.
I think that's pretty interesting. I haven't really had a lot of background in going to public places and trying to public perform, but I definitely have experienced, well, you do this and you're a musician, but you're okay, but if you're introduced with this kind of a background, you are not as a legitimate musician as if you were introduced just as a musician. Just because I also have cosplay as a hobby. Mm-hmm. And I've encountered a lot of people that when they just meet me as a musician, they're like, oh, yeah, that's cool. But if they meet me as a cosplayer and then they find out I also do music, until they hear what I really do, they assume, oh, well, you probably sing in really bad Japanese because you're probably born in America and kind of Japanese, but not really. And you probably sound terrible and you're probably doing it for the attention and you're not really a musician. Sometimes it's hard because you don't want to fight and correct every person who's an asshole, you know? You don't want to sit there and be like, hi, I'm actually an import. I'm from Japan. And, I've been doing music for a reasonable amount of time, at least long enough to know what should see the light of day and what shouldn't. Those terrible B-side takes in my laptop that no one will ever see. And yeah, I'm actually not doing it just for attention because I assume that being biologically female, if I wanted the sort of unfortunate attention that being a girl who claims to be a musician that does not have any sort of talent or drive or effort put into their business, I could apparently do that by just walking around mostly naked. And that seems like a lot less effort than telling people I'm a musician. So, there's always a wall when people see you in ways that they don't expect to. And sometimes people think that's really cool. I've had lots of people introduced to me through cosplay who are like, you do music, and then they hear it, or they're just like, oh, that's really cool, and they're interested in what I also do as a side hobby. But there's always going to be people that assume the worst of you because they have a preset notion, and then they're displeased when that preset notion is not actually accurate. People don't like being told that they're wrong. I've had people actually be angry because I'm good at music, because they expect me to go on stage and be like, Moe, kyun desu yo.
Oh my God.
Yeah, maids, Japan, kyun, bong. And I go on stage and I do my business and I'm like, oh, that was reasonably not terrible. And then they're just angry because I'm not actually terrible as they thought I was. I'm not some sort of giant attention-seeking robot with their balls out and about for everyone to see. And that's just something that, you're just going to have to chalk up to, that's what they're going to think. And if they're just angry that they can't think that, then there's nothing you can really do.
I have run into that anger thing, and that is actually intensely comforting because most of the people I've talked to have not run into that kind of anger thing. But I have run exactly into that before. And I'm not like making this up. I am totally like live here, and it is such a relief to run into someone else who's run into that anger. Wow, that's not where I expected this to go.
I think it's a combination of there's people who feel like they aren't very special themselves, and that they've either resigned themselves to feeling like their lives are nothing special, and so they feel like everyone else should not be something special or strive to be special. Or even people that think that they're a bit more special than everyone else and are displeased to know that there's people out there that they think are better than them. And, you can stay up all night thinking, oh, well, why are they so angry? But they're just filled with anger. And there's not really a lot you can do about that because they're probably angry for a lot of things that you can't do anything about and isn't really worth your time. I've had people, be complete bitches to me because I'm good at music and they don't want me to be good at music. And I've had people who also do music and are not, in fact, excited to find out that I also do music and I'm reasonably good at it because, I don't know, you can't waste all your energy wondering why people won't accept you for who you are or what they are. And if they got problems, you really can't do anything about it unless you're willing to spend a lot of time and energy on one person when you're going to encounter a lot of people like that. Not everyone's going to be happy that you either have a talent or want to spend the effort to get a talent. Not everyone's going to be happy that you find joy in something in your life. I've had people that just seem very, very angry about the fact that I have enjoyable hobbies, which, you think, wait, this has nothing to do with you. I'm not taking up attention that you could be getting, or I'm not being an asshole about this thing. You're just legitimately displeased about the fact that I have things in my life that are enjoyable, or I try to make the world more enjoyable for me.
One thing I found with that specifically, that kind of magic bit that we were talking about before, and I'm still a little bit womper-jawed at the whole, I love that word, womper-jawed.
I really like crotchological regions, but I don't get to say it much.
Oh, great. Here we go again. No, damn it. Let's get this done. I'm really kind of womper-jawed at the whole anger thing because while I've certainly experienced that, like I said before, I haven't run into other people talking about experiencing that a lot. So I'm kind of totally going off script here and going basically yes to all of this because, yes, I've run into this and it's really horrible to have other people running into the same thing. But it's also really reassuring that it's not me. When people get really angry, it's because of I'm speeding up and slowing down the earth a little bit because it's funny to watch everybody go, whoa, 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 whoa. I'm sorry, I didn't go into that. I'm a supervillain. And which basically means, from my perspective, there's multiple kinds of supervillain ones. The ones who are in it for the lulz, that's me. Ones who are in it for, money, and I think they're wasting their time. They should be bankers. And there's another one who's in it for, the global domination thing, like you, which is awesome, but not my thing. Because the problem with having to run everything is that you have to run everything. And that's just too much work.
I don't actually want to run everything. I just want to dominate it once. And then, I assume that whoever wants to run it can run it. Or if everyone's like, nah, we're just going to go back to being countries, that's okay too.
Oh,
I would just like to unite all of the earth and being really pissed at me, but not being able to really do anything about it because I have big robots and they don't.
Exactly.
And then I'll go home. I'll probably have some toast and some egg and maybe a donut, and if I'm feeling up to it, and I'll probably put my J-dramas on and, watch ancient Japan documentaries or something. It's good to have a golden life.
It is.
That's what keeps you young.
One of the things with the anger that you talk about, and I'm really going off script here in being glad yet horrified in that I'm really glad that someone else has run into this and horrified that other people do. But in terms of the whole having the magic bit set or not, like the people you run into through cosplay who automatically discount you because they ran into you first through cosplay, is that I've certainly found it's very difficult to get those people to even listen to you.
Oh, yeah, that's true. A lot of the people who like to dismiss my music or they get angry when other people like my music, I find out they've never even listened to any of it. They've never heard it.
And I don't know what, if anything, you should do about that. I mean, I guess mostly it's just like, goodbye, have fun.
I think that's really the only reaction you can have because, your instinct is to be like, no, I'm not terrible. Like, change your opinion of me. But the people who want to have a certain opinion of you are going to do so, and trying to change their minds when they don't want to is really not only futile, but big waste of your energy. Because, you know, what are you going to get at the end of the day? Dozens of hours trying to talk to someone, convincing them to listen to your music, in which case they might physically listen to it, but already as they're listening to it, just thinking up of insults that they're going to talk about and not actually like, trying to look at it without their own filters on. And for all of your effort, all you're going to get at the end of the day is self-satisfaction that maybe someone doesn't hate you when they shouldn't. Or at least that's what I feel like it comes down to whenever I get upset that other people don't like my things, which was really common when I was a lot younger. I tend to not really care anymore, but when I was younger, I would get very upset because I would feel like I was at least owed a chance, until you realize that, you know, no one really owes you anything. As upsetting as it is, the people who don't like your music and the people who don't like you and don't listen to your music and decide to make their decisions without doing that, they don't actually owe it to you to listen to your music. You really wish that they did, you know, that they did owe it to you to give it a chance, but they don't. Because if someone wants to think that you're terrible and thus anything you do must be terrible, that's their opinion.
That really kind of comes back around to being kind of a barrier, that perception, to actually trying, I think, in that I'm not sure where I'm going here. I think that there's some combination of fear of being judged and fear of being ignored both.
I think a lot of people think that they fear being judged, but if you do music enough, you realize that being ignored is worse. At least when people don't like your things, there is a small chance that they'll tell you why they don't like it. And if that's something you can work on, like they might not like it because they're like, oh, you're flat. Oh, you're sharp. Oh, you're shit. Oh, your lyrics are terrible. Oh, your delivery is terrible. Oh, you sound really bad. Oh, you mixed this really, really badly because you didn't actually mix this. I thought you did, but then you didn't actually do so. And that's why it sounds absolutely fucking terrible. Yeah, everything's the same volume. And I can hear you coughing in the background or scratching something. I don't even know what you're scratching, just scratching something. But that's all things you can, you work on. And it's all for your ultimate benefit. But being ignored, there's just nothing except knowing that people don't even think that you're worth the time to insult. They might not even listen to it, There's nothing more depressing than uploading something that you think you've done a good job on to, YouTube or something, and checking back a month later and seeing that absolutely no one has listened to it. That emptiness, that feeling of you put so much time and effort and you put out yourself. I think a lot of times when I make music, I have a really hard time writing music in public. I know that a lot of people are like, oh, I'll go to Starbucks with my laptop and do my business and I'll be a musician writing music. But I couldn't do that because when I write a lot of music, as frivolous as my music is, I feel like it's a lot like, well, let's open up my stomach and inspect my guts and see what's in there. And, that's your insides.
Yeah, exactly.
That's your embarrassing insides. It might have lumps and bruises and some sort of weird veiny bits that other people may or may not have.
And what's this bird thing? What is this?
Might be bigger or smaller or some sort of weird color that you're not sure if that's supposed to be that shape. You check around your guts and you see what's in your insides and you polish it up a bit, and then you think about what parts you want to show other people and you think about what parts you don't want to show other people. And that's where your music comes from. And when you put so much effort into something, assuming you didn't just blurt out your bunch of farts and put it up on YouTube calling it the fart song, which
would get 8 million hits in the first 6 hours.
Auto-tuned, and then also guest appearance by that one guy who is famous for being auto-tuned.
And the
then
grumpy
also,
cat.
Yeah, that guy. I mean, I'm guessing that everyone's always happy to know that other people also like the shape of their insides, but you almost get a feeling of, oh, wow, I hope people really like this. And then, oh, I hope people don't actually look at the insides. I hope they just look at what shape they are and not look too closely. Or, oh, I hope that they like my insides, because what if they don't like my insides? But the worst feeling is when you've put out something very specific about yourself out there and no one cares. And I think that might be the biggest hurdle to someone making original music. I know a lot of people that, as vocalists or as musicians, they start off by covering other songs. It's very common on this Japanese...
You're painting pictures of someone else's inside.
It's very common on this Japanese... The equivalent of Japanese YouTube is Nico Nico Doga, and it's very, very common on there for people to be like, oh, here's this popular original Vocaloid song, I'm going to cover it. and they do a lot of covers and then they get popular that way. But I respect those people because it's not like they pooed into the camera and then it got a billion hits.
It's not like there's not an art to doing a good cover, if you're particularly if you're bringing anything original to it, and it still sounds good.
But it's still that really big leap from painting in the lines of someone else's picture of their insides and putting your own insides out there. When you do it, you feel like you're the only person who's faced all of the feelings and emotions and pain and tribulation of doing this, and you put your guts out there. But there's a lot of other people who also do that. There's even people who pretend to do that, and you feel like they're not as good as you are. You feel like, wait, I put my guts out there. Why don't people like me? And that's probably one of the biggest things that I've heard from new people about their fears of making their own music. Like, they're embarrassed that it's not very good, and they're embarrassed that, they might not show their guts very well, but a lot of it comes down to it. They're afraid that no one will care. And that's something you really have to work around because everyone has guts. And you have to face the fact that everyone has guts and everyone has different opinions about guts. Some people might like guts, some people might not. A really close friend of mine recently told me that they just don't listen to any music. They're a gamer, and I asked them, "Oh, what do you do while you play your games?" Because they said that they don't play it with the sound on. So I assumed, oh, they've got music going on in the background, and they told me, "Oh, yeah, no, I don't like music. I don't really listen to any music." And I had just this moment of I had to look at them like they were maybe an alien.
Yep.
And I would maybe should turn on my phone voice recorder. Every nerd has that thought in the back of their minds whenever you watch spy movies or horror movies or some shit where you're just like, if I was the main character, I'd be so much better at that shit. And
then you're not.
At least I formulate in the back of my mind, okay, if I ever encounter someone who sounds a bit like a supervillain, I'm going to take my phone and put on the recording button because you never know when that recorded conversation is going to come in handy. If I was in an action movie, I just fucking record everything just in case sometime, some point, some big bad guy's talking about his plan and how no one will ever believe me. And I'll be like, bitch, I recorded your voice, bitch.
Never monologue. Never monologue. Never monologue. That's in 101 these days. Never fucking monologue. Ever.
But yeah, they told me they don't listen to any music at all, and I just had to freeze up because how do you not listen to any music?
I know.
What do you say to that? How do you come back to that? How do you even go from there? I can't even begin to comprehend that. It'd have been better if they told me that they don't have any guts. I could have lived with them not having intestines. They might not have been able to, but I could have lived with that.
Not for very long. They'd be, very skinny and then dead. Here, have a sandwich. It won't help. I don't have intestines. Oh.
But putting your own music out there it's always dangerous because what if they don't like it? Or worse, what if no one listens to it?
Cares? And the thing is, so many people are not going to care. Yeah.
A lot of people don't care. Or you think you did something awesome and then other people don't actually think it's very interesting. But then they like that other song that you wrote about disco alpacas and they think it's the shit.
But who doesn't like disco alpacas, really?
I like disco alpacas.
Exactly.
Mainly because I wrote a song about them that you all should totally go forth and Google right now.
Yeah, you should download it. And wherever we put this, which is probably going to be on YouTube and SoundCloud, we'll have links down here. Except this is an audio podcast. There's no video part, so you won't see me pointing. But I'm pointing. I'm pointing down. Are you into geek music, chiptunes, elf metal, filk, geek rock, nerdcore, whatever, and have an urge to talk about it? Do you have a reasonably decent microphone and an internet connection? Do you have a superpower or minion card? Or, failing that, are you a loner with few to no social ties or familial relationships and who won't be missed? If so, contact me. I'm looking for a co-host, or research subject, or co-host. It's kind of the same thing, really. Crime at crimeandtheforcesofevil.com. Let me know. Well, that's it for another episode of the Geek Music Podcast. We hope you've enjoyed it and told your friends. If you want a news item in next month's episode, or if you have a topic you want us to talk about, or a guest you want us to bring on, just let us know. See you next month. From Supervillain Studios, this is the NWC Radiophonic Workshop.